morning. My name is Murray Hines. I'm a judge of the Provincial Court of Saskatchewan, sitting in Regina. For the past 8 years, I've had the privilege of sitting in the Regina Drug Treatment Court, along with my colleague and friend, Judge Clifford Toth. I hope you've learned a lot over the last 2 days about therapeutic courts. I know I have. This morning, you're going to see and hear from some of the graduates of drug treatment courts. Have you ever wanted to make a small change in your life? As we know, making small changes takes commitment and determination. Now imagine wanting to make a big change in your life, a change that may make the difference between life and your death. To be successful in making any big change means you have to be totally committed. You have to be completely determined to reach your goal and to stay there. You also have to change all of your routines and habits, and you're also going to need some help. This means surrounding yourself with people who are supportive of you and the change that you want to make, and leaving others behind. The graduates you're about to meet have made big changes in their lives. Each of them lived a very different life from what they lead today. Each of them struggled with drug addiction and chaos and the self-destructive behavior which accompanies it. Many of our grads were at one time estranged from their family and true friends. They were lost souls who were committing crimes to fuel their drug addiction. They were also facing substantial jail sentences, and more importantly, they were facing their own mortality. Rather than going to jail, serving their sentences, and returning to their old familiar world of addiction, sickness, and crime, these individuals did something far more meaningful. They gradually overcame their addiction while being in their community. They found their sobriety and embraced it. They left the drug and crime world behind them, and they reunited with their family. They're now healthy parents, raising healthy children. They are now reliable and helpful sons and daughters, aunties, uncles, and I think we have a grandfather or grandmother or two. They've also found jobs, they pay taxes, and they make meaningful contributions in their communities. We're here today to celebrate the success of these courageous and gifted graduates. They each have their own unique story to tell. Please listen very carefully. You're about to hear very real stories of redemption and the strength of the human spirit. And with that, I'll ask our first graduate, Susan, to come forward.
My name is Susan. I graduated from drug court in 2014. I have been clean and sober for almost 5 years. I am an only child that grew up in Saskatoon with a fairly normal middle-class family. I began experimenting with drugs at age 14. At first it was marijuana, acid, and mushrooms. Then at 16 I moved to Edmonton, where it quickly progressed to crack and cocaine. My parents came to Edmonton to plead with me to return home in the hopes I would straighten out my life. I came back to Saskatoon for a year and became pregnant with my daughter at age 17. Shortly after I gave birth to her, I began doing ecstasy and crystal meth, which led to my parents obtaining temporary custody of her. I then left for Vancouver for a while and continued to do whatever drugs were available, including trying heroin. At 20, I moved to London, UK, where I had been hired to work on a cruise ship. I never made it, due to the fact I could not keep myself clean long enough to pass the required drug testing. While in London, I used cocaine and ecstasy on a daily basis, until finally the guilt of leaving my daughter forced me to return. When I came back to Saskatoon, I was able to remain somewhat functional for the next 4 years, smoking weed and occasionally doing cocaine and ecstasy. I worked in a bar, and I took a summer class at the University of Saskatchewan, and I did quite well. I thought my life was going great. That fall, I registered for full-time studies, but within months, I began to use crystal meth again. I dropped out of school, and I moved to Calgary, where I again managed to stay clean for a year and get a job at Holt Renfrew. There I tried to work and manage my addiction at the same time. The addiction took over. It was at this point that crystal meth took over my life and alienated me from everything and anyone I had ever loved. I had plunged headfirst into a life of despair. At the height of my addiction, I remember thinking, this is it. This drug has got me. I truly believed I would never be free from it. I really compared it to having a terminal disease, one that I would eventually die from. I spent the next 10 years in absolute chaos. Psychosis, paranoia, and crime were part of my daily life. I rarely went a day without getting high, so to support my addiction, I began selling crystal meth. This ensured that my supply would never run out because without this drug, I could just not function. I used to wake up, I used to keep me going, I used to live, and I lived to use. What I did not realize was the damage I caused to those around me. My loved ones who stood back and watched as I transformed into someone they feared and loathed. Don't cry, Mom. I did not care about them. My only devotion was to my drug. I unfortunately pulled my then 12-year-old daughter into a world of destruction, a world where she never had the stability, guidance, and love she deserved. For 6 years, my daughter suffered emotional neglect and the terrifying reality of being cared for by an addict parent. Our life consisted of moving from house to house, staying in hotels, and hiding from the police. I was arrested numerous times over the 10 years, but always managed to get out on bail and go right back to selling and using. I was oblivious to the needs of my daughter, and I had no relationship with my parents. They had spent years begging me to get help and to come back home, but I refused. I hung out with gangsters, was a target on a hit list, and watched many people I knew die from the disease, but none of this affected me. At 34, I found myself in the worst position I could ever imagine. I fled Calgary with my boyfriend as we were plastered all over the news. We were wanted for a slew of charges, so I decided we would go back to Saskatchewan. After 3 months, we ended up getting arrested, and I was placed in Pine Grove and found out I was pregnant. My years of heavy crystal meth use and drug dealing had finally caught up with me. I had accumulated a long list of charges and was facing 3 to 4 years in a federal prison. I thought my life was ending, but this was actually the beginning. I spent 5 months in Pine Grove's Women's Correctional Center, and in that time my head began to clear. I realized the complete mess I had made of my life. The thought of losing the child I was carrying was devastating. I had heard about drug treatment court, and I thought this might be my only way out of the situation. The thought of spending years in prison terrified me. I had nothing to lose and everything to gain, so I decided to apply. Not everything worked out as smoothly as I expected. The Calgary Drug Treatment Court wasn't able to admit me due to the fact I would soon be having a baby. But something out of the ordinary happened. They referred my case to the Regina Drug Treatment Court, and I started talking to this amazing lady named Judy Burns. I came to the Regina Drug Court in October of 2012 with a beautiful 5-month-old baby named Cole. I knew at this point there was no turning back. This was the beginning of my transformation. I'm not gonna lie, for a really long time, the reality of going to jail motivated me to stay clean. But something strange was happening. For the first time in my life, I was never late. For the first time in my life, I attended something every day. For the first time in my life, I became responsible, accountable, and reliable. Drug treatment court was the primary force in my life that showed me how to live again. The people who believed in me and supported me throughout my journey have played the biggest role in helping define who I am today. The constant support, love, and faith they showed in me when nobody else did, allowed me to believe in myself while I learned how to live a life without drugs and crime. I'm very proud to say that I did not have one dirty urine screen the whole time I attended drug court, except of course when Judy had purchased a poppy seed cake for me. Drug treatment court supplied the environment I needed to get clean and stay clean, but always holding me accountable for my actions and supporting me through difficult times. I think of how different my life might have been today had it not been for drug court and the faith that they had in me. I am forever grateful. Today my life is amazing. I will be 5 years clean this October. I have a job that allows me to give back to the community by working with at-risk youth. I think it is important to note that one of my biggest fears getting clean was what I would do for a living. I hated the idea of doing a monotonous 9-to-5 job, because when I was selling drugs, I could make what most people would make in a month in 20 minutes. I could not have been more wrong. I wake up every day and I go to work knowing I make a difference in the lives of the young people I serve. Thank you, Drug Treatment Court, for helping me achieve my dreams. For the first time ever, I have a wonderful relationship with my family. I talk to my mother every day, and I have made amends to my daughter, who has graduated from correctional studies at Lethbridge College. My son is now 4 years old and is a healthy, happy little boy who brings me joy every day. Thank you.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Carl Bird. I'm from the Pegasus First Nation. I have lived in Regina since 1982. In my early years, I was a residential and commercial painter and level 3 carpenter. During that time, I occasionally smoked marijuana and drank recreationally. I decided to quit drinking back in 1996 and never tried it again. In 2000, my mother was diagnosed with lung cancer and lost her battle in 2004. After her death, I was dealing with a lot of grief. This was around the time I was introduced to crack cocaine. The first couple times I tried it, it didn't interest me. But the third time it hit me like a brick. I was hooked. I started using every chance I had. This led me to using crack cocaine for 10 years off and on, usually between jail time. I suffered a lot of consequences due to this drug. I stayed away from family because I was ashamed to be high in their presence. I had limited interactions with them while keeping in close touch with my relatives who were involved in gangs. I was continuously moving from place to place, avoiding getting caught by the police. I eventually lost everything I owned and loved. In 2004, I was deep into my addiction. I had lost my job, and the painting company that I worked for let me go. I couldn't afford my addiction anymore and was given the opportunity to start selling from a friend. Everything was going great until I was arrested and sentenced to 38 months at the Saskatchewan Penitentiary. After serving 16 months at Saskatchewan, I was released to Oscana halfway house. Following this, I sustained a serious back injury and it took me a year to learn to walk again. I began using cocaine again to deal with the pain and was involved with a girlfriend who also was an addict. This behavior led me to another arrest. This time, after spending 7 months on remand, something changed. I decided I was done with cocaine. I was bailed out by my brother Nelson, and as part of my probation order, I was to stay out of Regina. After 6 months, my probation officer told me I was accepted into the Regina Drug Treatment Court program. I started my journey with Drug Treatment Court on June 17, 2014. It was the best thing that ever happened to me. I completed the program in 326 days. I treated it like a job. I was never absent and was committed to all my aspects of the program. I am 56 years old. Being an older individual in the Drug Treatment Court, I was a mentor there. I led all our morning smudges that were part of the program. I completed the program with all clean screens. I've been alcohol-free for 20 years and drug-free for 2.5 years. I'm proud to say I've gained my health back. I now have my own place. I have more structure and a less chaotic life. I am a volunteer at Oscana Rehab, where I assist my brother Calvin and all of his friends who are in wheelchairs. After the turning point on remand and my brother Nelson bailing me out, I am now very close with my family. They have shown me a lot of love and support, and I am grateful for that. In February 2015, I started at Southeast Regional College. I achieved my grade 12 in May 2015. I started the grade 12 program in January and I have graduated in May. I have completed my lifetime goals of finishing my education. I will continue to further my education. I have yet to decide which path I want to take, but I'm looking at addiction counseling programs or completing a university degree. There is no turning back for me. I am thankful for the support of Judy Burns and the judges that they have shown. Judy is my biggest supporter, and if it wasn't for her, I wouldn't have done it. Also, many thanks to Susan and the counselors at DTC. Thank you, everybody.
My name is David Poloski. I'm 31 years old. I've been clean and sober for a little over 2 years. I graduated from drug court on April 15th, 2015. 18 years ago, when I was 13, I began using drugs. At first, I was experimenting with marijuana, alcohol, cigarettes, and mushrooms. Later on, when I was 17, I started using other drugs like cocaine, crack, ecstasy, MDMA, LSD, DMT, mescaline, meth, and pretty much anything else I could get my hands on whenever I could find it. Suffice it to say, I very quickly became addicted. Although I managed to maintain employment without getting fired, I was almost always high at home and at work. My life was a constant trip with the sole purpose of getting more drugs and pushing my tolerance limits. I had very little time to maintain any sort of relationship with my family or anyone that I knew that wasn't using, and I didn't really care to even if I had the time. I quickly drifted away from my family and deeper into the world of drugs. I started selling drugs to maintain my increasing appetite to get higher than ever before. This resulted in me associating with more dangerous people every day so I could keep up with my own habit. It became a normal occurrence for me to meet with various gang members that were covered in blood from whatever they just did to sell them drugs. I had become completely cut off from everyday society. Before being admitted into a Regina Drug Treatment Court, I had been arrested and visited the correctional facility several times. By this point in my self-destructive career of drug abuse, I had been unemployed for a few years and homeless for 2 of them. I had refined my addiction primarily to crystal meth and was injecting about $1,000 a day into my arms. I was still selling drugs, but that wasn't enough to keep up my habit, so I got into boosting with some people I became close with while homeless. Nothing was off limits. If there was money to be made from an activity, I was in. Unfortunately, every time I got arrested, it did not help rehabilitate me or deter me from committing more crime. It had the opposite effect, making me angrier with the system and made me a better or more willing criminal. I committed bigger crimes to get away with more just to spite the system. What started as minor shoplifting had grown into break and enters on stores, garages, houses, whatever I could think of at the time. Until drug court, the correctional system did nothing more than isolate me from reality and society. It made it easier for me to ignore the moral deterrence of committing crime. This isolation, combined with the way a person is treated in the correctional facility or the legal system at all by the guards, officers, and lawyers, bred more hatred and disrespect in me for the entire justice system. When a depressed person with addiction and nothing to live for is treated like the scourge of the earth, they seldom find it as motivation to change. I became good for only 2 things, getting high and getting arrested. One day, my lawyer begrudgingly said that I was apparently a prime candidate for drug court. He said nothing else, closed his books, and left. I never saw him again, and was sent back to the Hill with no explanation. When I was admitted to drug court, I, like many others, saw it simply as a way out of jail. I had no intention or desire to change my life or stop using. The staff at Drug Treatment Court had something else in mind. With the information and support given to me by the staff at Regina Drug Treatment Court, I slowly began to change the way I thought. I began to realize that what I actually wanted in my life, which was a life where I didn't have to be afraid of who might be coming for me next, be it the cops, the competition, or other addicts. I learned to identify my negative thoughts and behaviors before they became actions, and openly discuss them in group. When doing so, I had positive influence to help me see the irrationality of these thoughts and how I could change the way I reacted to them. Today, as I mentioned, I have a little over 2 years clean and sober, and have my 1-year-old daughter, Luna, in my life. I'm currently a supervisor at a landscaping company, and I'm able to take care of myself and my daughter. I pay my bills on time, and I'm even able to put a little away for my daughter's future. I've rebuilt my relationships with my family and can count on them and their support when I need it. I've built a network of positive and sober friends that help and support me on my path of recovery. Over the course of just 2 short years, I've gone from being a homeless thief in and out of jail whose only motivation was getting high, to being a productive member of society with friends I can trust that can trust me. I do my best to help people get into recovery and try to live my life as an example of an alternative that is possible for any addict. I owe my life to the Drug Treatment Court program and all the people that make it happen. Without it, I would not have changed anything about my life and would be dead or in jail. This program is a miracle and saves lives, at least mine. For that, I thank all of the judges, counselors, lawyers, directors, probation officers, social workers, and anyone else that is involved. Thank you.
First, I would like to acknowledge the Creator and say thank you, hi for having me here, clean and sober. My name is Asini. I'm a spirit of many good things. Most know me as Tanya. I've lived on Skid Row in many cities, and I'm lucky to have made it out alive. I've seen and been through many things that most of you could not imagine. I'm 36 years old. I have 3 beautiful children. I was born and raised right here in Regina. My father is Assiniboine, and my mother is Métis. I was raised by my grandparents from the time I was a baby. My parents were too young to care for me. My grandparents are good people who had a hard life. Both were alcoholics. However, my grandmother quit drinking when I came into her life. My grandfather drank throughout my childhood. They did the best they knew how, and I know that now. At the age of 11, I smoked my first cigarette. Man, that was a head rush. Little did I know that later in my life, that little head rush would be all that would consume me. When my grandparents divorced, around the same time, I was made a ward of the government. I ran from every place they put me in. I remember that little head rush I mentioned from the cigarettes. Well, I began using weed, acid, pills, and of course alcohol to chase it. I ended up in Edmonton, alone, 17 years old, and a new mother to a beautiful daughter. I had no idea how to be a human being, let alone how to be a single First Nation mother. I had no parenting skills. I was introduced to cocaine in one of the many abusive relationships that I dragged my daughter through. In no time, I went from doing a few lines to smoking crack cocaine to being a full-blown junkie. Shoplifting became a part of my daily routine, not only to feed my daughter, but also to feed the addiction. Crack cocaine really took me, us, for a spin. Abusive relationships, stolen cars, turning tricks, arguing with family. Eventually, my daughter was taken into care. I had nothing left. Alone and on the streets of Edmonton. By this time, it was one of the worst times of my life. Those streets are a scary place. I walked around so much the bottom of my feet were blistered. I slept in bushes and stood in lines to try to eat. I turned tricks, and I was actually held at gunpoint and left on the outskirts of the city of Edmonton. I was raped. I had nowhere to go and no one to help me. And then a small kindness, a stranger, a trick in fact, bought me a bus ticket back to Regina. He took me right onto the bus and told the bus driver not to let me off. So there I was, back in Regina, withdrawing from crack cocaine, hallucinating, going through the sweats, the bad dreams, contemplating suicide many times. Then I found out I was pregnant with my son. I had short periods of sobriety, but still didn't know how to help myself. I was so scared something would be wrong with my son, but he came into this world perfect. I had changed locations, but not lifestyles. I was still using, and again, I tried something new. I began to use IV drugs. I thought life was bad before. Being an IV drug user was even worse. My son was taken into care as well, into social services, and I lost myself even more into the needles. I was injecting everything, working the street and ripping off everyone. Eventually, I racked up 80 charges and was introduced to the Regina Drug Treatment Program for the first time. I didn't last long. I messed up and I found myself serving my first jail sentence. It was a horrible experience, and yet I got out and continued to use IV drugs. Crazy, right? So here I was, later on, in the hospital, pretty much on my deathbed. My kidneys were bleeding and my skin was a bright yellow. I had hepatitis C and it almost killed me. I've been in custody in the hospital, picked up on warrants, and then released to drug court once again, and told to go right to Kate's place. So guess what I did? Here I was hooked up to an IV of morphine drops from the hospital, and I was in the bathroom still injecting more morphine. Insanity. I was almost dead and I was still using. So I went to Kate's place, very sick. The staff watched over me and took good care of me. They loved and nurtured me back to good health when no one else would, not even myself. I'm so grateful for those ladies today. On my first day at Drug Court Center, we had a check-in circle. I was high and I felt like the biggest liar. So I checked into the detox center. I was sick and I was scared. The doctor at the detox told me that it'll always be a statistic that opiate users always go back to using, and gave me another prescription for methadone. I handed him back the prescription and I walked out of his office, and I've been clean ever since. My time in drug court was tough. I was managing to stay clean, the rules I had to follow helped, so did the drug screens, and of course the weekly court appearances with Judge Toth and Judge Hines. But I was so broken from all that I've been through. It was all starting to surface. The abuse, the violence, the abandonment issues, the hurt, the anger, and the shame and guilt of the sexual behaviors I had. I needed to get it out. I needed to talk. And I needed to cry and grieve properly. So broken, I needed to find outside support services to help me get through the drug treatment court program. When I did, I found so much more than I expected. For one thing, I found my job that I love so much. But I found even something so much more. I found my culture. I found my roots. During my track 3 of my program, I began a journey, a sacred journey, a journey that has been lost for so long. I found ceremony. I found the sweat lodge. I found the Creator. Or maybe He found me. Surrendering myself to the Creator has been quite the process. I still struggle, but not as much as I used to. Today, I am more at peace with myself. I respect myself differently. And I also understand myself a little better today. Today, I am a better person. Today, I have my children with me, and I've been blessed with a new baby. I work and support with persons that are living and affected with HIV and Hep C and addiction issues. People just like me. I would like to say thank you to Drug Court and everyone that helped to get me here today. Hi, thank you.
My name is Ryan McCorston. I was accepted into the Drug Treatment Court program on October 23rd, 2013, and it likely saved my life. I grew up in an upper middle class family. My mom and dad were married and both worked steady jobs. My older brother had graduated from university with a degree in business administration. My drug abuse began when I was 14 years old. I started to experiment, smoking marijuana and drinking alcohol with friends. By the time I was 16, I was drinking while attending school and selling marijuana. I was eventually caught and charged with trafficking. I did 70 hours of community service to avoid going to Diljack. I started to steal from my family and from other people. At 17, I started to use harder drugs, ecstasy, cocaine, crack, and I moved out to live with other addicts. I lived in a crack house with needles all over the floor. I was using cocaine and crack daily. When I was 18, I was cooking cannabis oil at a friend's house, and the furnace ignited the butane, causing a flash fire. I received second-degree burns to my arm and federal charges of arson and production and possession of a controlled substance. 2 other people were also injured. My lawyer told me I was facing 4 years in jail, or I could clean up and spend a year in drug treatment court. I decided to give drug treatment court a chance since it sounded better than being locked up for 4 years. I entered the drug treatment court program with a heavy addiction to cocaine and marijuana. I was not very happy about being there as my mind was still distorted from all the drugs in my system. Still, I made the decision to stay clean for the duration of the treatment program. I made a deal with myself. I told myself at the beginning that I just had to stay clean for the year and then I could go back to my old ways. After about 8 months, I saw my life getting better. I made the decision then that I would stay clean and sober even after I was done the drug treatment court program. One of the rules for getting into drug treatment court is that you can't have any violent charges. Since the arson charge is considered a violent charge, they made an exception for me and postponed dealing with the arson charge until my graduation day. I didn't know that though. Probably not a bad thing looking back at it. And it meant that each week I attended drug treatment court, not knowing if they were going to arrest me. This is very stressful. In the end though, I graduated, I succeeded, and I'm sober and clean because of it. The biggest takeaway that I learned from drug treatment court is that I'm not alone. Other people have gone through things similar to what I have, and I don't have to battle this addiction alone anymore. I have people who I can turn to and ask for help. Without drug treatment court, I have no doubt that I would either be dead or in jail. In fact, at the age of 18, I would joke with my friends that if I wasn't dead by the time I was 21, it would be a miracle. I'm 21 now, alive, not in jail, or worried about being there. My recovery has brought me many things that I never have imagined possible. I have a healthy relationship with my mom and dad. I have a great job where I can give back to the community by helping at-risk youth who struggle with similar issues to what I've gone through. I have friends that support me. None of this would have been possible without drug treatment court. I can't thank drug treatment court enough for the freedom and gifts of recovery that I have received. Thank you.
My name is Norman Pino. I'm 48 years old and have been sober for going on 3 years. I was born in Hamilton, Ontario, but spent most of my life in Alberta. And I've spent over half my 48 years in prison. I've been addicted since I was 15, smoking weed and drinking excessively. And once I shot up for the first time, my whole universe revolved around shooting drugs. I committed petty theft, break and enters, trafficking to support my addiction. I hurt friends and family to get what I craved. There were very few lines I wouldn't cross to achieve this. I had countless run-ins with law enforcement and prison. So not only did I have to overcome being an addict, I had to get past being institutionalized, and I was just basically killing myself to live. My last thought at night was of drugs, and my first thought when I woke up. Staying awake for weeks at a time became normal. Living and sleeping in the same clothes for days and days also became normal. I lost my self-esteem, stopped taking care of myself, stopped caring about consequences, and I avoided my reflection. I hated who I'd become, and I often thought about death and dying. The thing that I held on to, that if I died, it would emotionally destroy my mom and my family. I still cared enough about the people who loved me to continue existing, which is not to be confused with living. I was married with 2 wonderful sons before all this, but my addiction made short work of that. My wife surprisingly stayed with me for the first 12 years. But addiction destroys love, except for the love of the needle. My oldest son, who's 28, he wants nothing to do with me, and I really don't blame him. And my younger son, Jacob, he's 27, he has forgiven me, and for that I thank God. Despite the hell I created, it still wasn't enough to hit my bottom. In 2012, I found myself in the back of a police car and in the Regina Correctional Center for the 1,000th time. I had been arrested for a break and enter from 2009. I was so sick from withdrawal that I didn't even have enough energy to get my meal tray for the first 2 weeks. And there's a feeling of utter despair. You have no energy, no appetite. You're incredibly tired and weak, but unable to sleep. You're forced by your mind and body to endure every moment. I remember thinking, is this finally my bottom? This is when Regina Drug Treatment Court came into my life, and when I decided to make real positive changes. I found myself in an interview with Judy Burns, applying for drug court and begging for another chance. For me, change began with a drastic edit of the people I allowed into my inner circle and who I would talk to. Drug treatment court gave me hope, skills, and the motivation I needed to get me started on this journey. During one of our Tuesday after court check-ins, our leader Judy said she wished she could find out how to flip the switch in people suffering from addiction. She has seen this phenomenon happen many times, but is still mystified about the exact trigger that put them in the headspace to inspire that change. I can't describe the exact event or moment that flicked my switch, but I can tell you, at one time while in detox, I made a decision to really try and become the man I knew I was. It's a sad day when you find yourself wondering who would come to your funeral if you died, and if they did come, what would or what could they say? I don't worry about that these days. Those days are gone, and so is my struggle with drugs. I no longer contemplate drugs or alcohol, and with any luck, my funeral is a very long ways off. Now I volunteer at drug court every Tuesday, hoping to change even one person's life or help them make it back from the edge of oblivion. Because if I can change my life for the better, trust me, anyone can. And at this point, I'd like to acknowledge a few people who were instrumental in my transformation. I'd say thanks to Murray Hubik, who was a manager at DTC and is now one of my closest friends. Judy Burns, who has shown me a tough but fair treatment, who taught me that it's okay to be in recovery and that who I was yesterday does not define who I am today. And to my boss, Jason Brecker, and his wife, Deanna, who gave me the opportunity to exceed, because without taking that first chance on me, I may not be where I am today. And my pastor, of course, Wayne Josephson, who helped me every single day, bringing me closer to God. And of course, to the Regina Pats hockey team that gave me the perfect outlet to fill my emotional needs on those cold winter nights. Thanks.
I am 26 years old and I've been clean and sober for approximately 3.5 years. I grew up in Regina, Saskatchewan. My childhood was very simple. I grew up in a normal home. My parents were casual drinkers. My father drank a little on the weekends, and my mother only on special occasions. Neither of them were into drugs. I was good in school for the first few grades. I was in competitive sports such as hockey, soccer, but I felt like I didn't really fit in anywhere. I saw myself as different, and I had very few friends. I was always getting bullied and getting into trouble for standing up for myself. In grade 4, I started smoking cigarettes with friends. Just a couple months later, I tried weed for the first time. I was probably about 10 or 11 years old. Right away, I felt like I had fit in. Everybody wanted to hang out, smoke, and get stoned all the time. I was making more and more friends, and there was something fun to do all the time. In grade 7 or 8, I was getting stoned every day. I was trying alcohol as well as other drugs like mushrooms, ecstasy. The summer before high school, I did cocaine for the first time. In high school, I stuck to my friends and everybody that partied. The more you drank and the more you did drugs, the more popular you were. So I had no problem with that. In grade 9, I was skipping classes. I didn't care about anything but partying and getting high. My grades slowly started to drop. The first time I smoked crack, I was probably grade 10. And right away I was hooked. I started working part-time to feed my habits, but it was never enough. I started stealing from other people in the places that I had worked. I gave up working and started selling drugs because it was easier. I made more money that way. And no matter what, my habit was fueled. Over the next couple of years, it progressively got worse. I was a daily user. My grades were so poor I barely passed grade 12. I was just hanging out with the same people and causing trouble. My parents started to also catch on. Late nights, me not coming home, having money, no job, funny smells coming from my room in the basement, but when I was asked about the suspicious activity, I told them to mind their own business. Over the next few years, my addiction got worse. I had charges for assaults, possession, and prohibited weapons because of my lifestyle. I'd also put my family through a lot because of my addiction. The list of things is too long to even go through, but it all hurt my family and everybody around me. I see why they call it a family disease. I lived a couple different lives trying to hide my addiction from everybody. At age 20, I had my first child. I had been an addict for 9 to 10 years. I was a well-known dealer. I was a daily crack user with no willpower to get out of the cycle of destruction I was causing myself and everybody around. Not long after my child was born, I was denied access to him. I became depressed and my addiction skyrocketed. It became my main reason for using. At the same time, I broke my knee doing a stupid stunt at a farm party, trying to be cool. So now I'm sitting at home, I'm depressed, in a cast with nothing to do but use. A couple of weeks later, the police raided my parents' house while they were home, and I went to jail. I was looking at a couple of years jail time for all the stuff I was doing at the current time. After a few months of trying to get bail, my lawyer gave me a brochure for the Regina Drug Treatment Court. I agreed to attend because I would get out of the jail the next day, and not really knowing what I was getting myself into. Now I will tell you what drug court did for me. Drug court taught me how to be honest through the in-house counseling, urine screens, and mandatory meetings. It taught me about my addiction and how it is considered a disease, how it affects everyone around me, and how to change my behaviors and start working on the underlying issues. They put me into detox countless times and into treatment and didn't give up on me as long as I didn't give up on myself. The staff and the judges are awesome and really believe in what they are doing. The program teaches you about your addiction and how to cope and live normal lives. And it's run by the most awesome person in the world I've ever met, Judy. She is passionate about her job, helping others, and she cares about other people and doesn't give up on them as long as she isn't working harder on your recovery than you are. And Regina Drug Treatment Court wouldn't be the same without her. Today, I work 2 jobs. I am a commercial roofer during the day. I've done that for the past 3 years and plan on making a career out of it. At night, I part-time pizza delivery for Domino's Pizza. I have a fiance with 2 kids who I met in treatment. She is also clean and sober today. We see our kids on a regular basis, every weekend or more. I have a license, a decent vehicle, just started renting my first house and I am looking to buy very soon. I'm also thinking of starting a small roofing company in the next couple of years. Drug treatment court, it works. We need more funding, more places, and more people like this. It could change addiction in society. Today, I work, I go to meetings, I spend time with my family, and best of all, I have myself back. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Warren. I'm 28 years old. My journey with addiction began around the age 8, where I experimented using marijuana and alcohol. By the time I was 13, I tried amphetamines for the first time and realized it was my drug of choice. I was addicted for 12 years before entering DTC. Before DTC, my life was complete chaos. I was out every night partying and selling drugs. If I didn't make $1,000 a day, I was upset. I neglected my physical health, and because of the lifestyle, I was preparing my body for the onset of diabetes. The dangerous choices I made led to an incident where I was physically attacked because of a drug deal that had gone wrong, and I was sprayed and beaten until the point of hospitalization. My spiritual and emotional health was non-existent. I could no longer feel emotions, and drugs were the love of my life and the only thing I was committed to. I alienated myself from my family and the people who mattered most in my life. I was incapable of making the connections of being emotionally present for the ones who needed me the most. I had no access to my son and would only see my family on special occasions that I have little to no memory of. The only thing I was focused on was the money and the drugs, both of which were never in short supply. This is what mattered the most. On September 28th, I was arrested for trafficking and sentenced to a year of conditions. I spent 2 months in the Regina Correctional. This is when the fog began to clear and I started to realize I have some sort of a problem. But I was not sure how to solve it. The turning point for me occurred when I found out who my new neighbors were. I realized the environment I was in and I needed help. This is when I heard about DTC and thought this could be my ticket out of here. When I came to Regina Drug Treatment Court, I was still stuck in my own ways. After seeing some progress and seeing how happy this made my family, I decided to fully commit to the program and I chose to stay on this path. It was not easy at first, and I had overcome many obstacles, such as old friends who pressured me to return to the lifestyle. It was a constant battle between the life I had always known and this new way of living that involved honesty, integrity, and accountability. It was not easy to turn down the lure of crime because it came with the money. Somehow I managed to stay clean for the majority of my time. I continued to meet many people who were going through similar situations. I was encouraged and cared for by a great staff that really seemed to believe in me. This was something I had never experienced within the justice system. For that, I am grateful. I am proud to say I graduated from the DTC on April 29, 2014. I have been given a wonderful opportunity in life. I have a job that supports and defines me. I truly feel blessed to be able to give back to the youth in the community. I feel like I should have been doing this years ago, but it's hard to see clearly in the midst of addiction. I am proud to say that I run evening program at a well-known youth organization and mentor 5 kids in what little spare time I have left. I work 6 days a week, but I wouldn't change it for anything in the world. If only I had more days, I would work them. Today I'm a productive citizen, a caring father, a loving son, a brother, and an uncle. Today I put others before myself. My family is the driving force in my life, and I dedicate my time to creating memories with them. Today I am proud as my family stands by me, watching me transform into the man they always hoped I would be.
My name is Michael Sagriff. I'm 51 years of age, single and somewhat content with my life. I'm originally from Ontario, where I lived for most of my life, which was a complete disaster before coming to Regina Drug Treatment Court. It could easily be said that I was a product of our correctional system. I was a 45-year-old recidivist with well over 50 convictions. I had been in some type of trouble with the law since I was 5 years old. This being the first time the police having to bring me home. I was also institutionalized to a great extent and had developed a severe hatred for any kind of authority, as I was more than willing to express, and usually in a very negative way. A lot of assault police charges, resist arrest, etc. Both parents had problems with alcohol, yet they really had a little influence in my life due to the fact that the courts were taking me away from them very early. When they put me in these so-called Buster homes, boys homes, group homes, etc., things really started to go wrong for me. Especially as I got older, then it was crime school, was in session. By the time I was a teen, I was a thief, I was a liar, and in no time at all, I was an addict. I started with weed and booze on the weekends, and the next thing I knew, I was kicked out of school and on my way to jail. This being the pattern of my life for the next 25 years or so. The crimes increased in severity, from thefts to drug smuggling to armed robberies and attempted murder on a police officer. Along with these crimes came the inevitable longer sentences. I started with a 1-year sentence, and they progressively got longer. I even managed to turn an 8-year sentence into 9. I guess I just wasn't happy. I was out of control. To date, I have calculated that I have spent approximately half of my life incarcerated or under some type of supervision. By my record, it's about 21 and a half years or 7,847 days. As Judge Toth pointed out to me, a lot of missed days at the beach. Admittedly, there were some positive opportunities throughout, where things could have turned out different, such as jobs, training, counseling, etc. But once again, I was just not ready. After my last federal sentence, I got lucky and became an iron worker. I was offered an apprenticeship and became somewhat proficient at it. To some extent, I even enjoyed it. I was in a relationship with a lady and 3 boys, but once again, drug and alcohol use interfered and things just don't work out. For some people, but not for I. 7 years ago, I was once again released, and this time I was released to Regina, having stuck a pin in a map, so to speak. I didn't really know anybody out here. Due to my not knowing anyone, it wasn't long before I was up to no good again, using drugs and drinking, and in no time at all acquiring numerous charges. This making my chances of returning to prison much higher. My mental state was at its lowest ever. I cared not if I died or if I lived. This made for a very dangerous person, to myself and to others. It was at this point someone mentioned drug court, which didn't really ring any bells with me either. I had never heard of such a thing in all my years in the system. I just never heard of it. The comments were both positive and negative, Thankfully, I checked it out for myself. I believe my lawyer at the time may have thought I was a little crazy, seeing this possibly, or not even probably, not working out too well. That was in October 2010, and I graduated in May of 2012, making it 4 years to date sober. During this time, I still made mistakes, more than a few if I recall correctly. Yet the judge, the staff, the lawyers, they all endured and put up with me. And it still amazes me today. I had finally met with people who really cared. They, especially Jerry Burns and my counselor Sarah at the time, were able to see past something that no one else had ever had in the past. For the first time in my whole life, I was being looked at as a person with issues, instead of just another criminal in front of the courts for an unknown number of times, and wondering how long do we lock him away for this time. Even after graduation, I acquired another charge for theft, for which I had no reliable or reasonable answer as to why. This just showed me that there were still things I had to deal with other than the fact of just staying clean and sober. Since then, there have been no more major errors in judgment, no more crime, thus no more charges, no more booze or drugs, or negative people. That equals a much less stressful life for me, which in turn means the same for the community, for which I am very grateful today. At present, I do some volunteer work for the Salvation Army and have a great respect for the people and programs. They also played a great part in my life changes. I'm also taking a self-help program at present to help me stay where I am. Best of all, I'm still in regular touch with the Regina Drug Treatment Court and the aftercare that they offer. In closing, I'd like to point out that even though I can't see the future, I'm almost 100% certain had I not experienced this program, I would have been in jail or dead. And this program has not only saved my life, but it's saved society as a whole from a whole lot of further grief on my behalf. It does not work for all, as I'm sure no treatment program can claim. Yet if someone does give it a chance, becomes honest with themselves, and wants to change, this is the one I'd recommend. Very sincerely and gratefully, the recovered addict. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us. I'd like our grads to rise up and step forward. And we're going to fill this stage. And with our grads, I'd like to say that when you rise, we all rise. I'd like to thank you for the courage you've shown for sharing your stories of recovery with us today. To our grads, I say, stay healthy, maintain your hard-earned sobriety, enjoy your new lives. When you succeed, we all succeed. Thank you.